Hello, everyone. Welcome. So excited to see you joining us this morning for our very special Women's History Month panel on local government women in leadership. Just going to give everyone a couple more seconds to get logged in, and then we'll get started. Good morning. Hi. All right. Well, we are so excited to have you all today. On the next slide, you'll see that my name is Erica Manuel. I am the CEO and Executive Director of the Institute for Local Government, or ILG. I am just so excited to be here with all of you today as we celebrate and honor some of our incredible women in local government. We're going to have a conversation today, and we hope that conversation is inspiring and uplifting and insightful and, of course, fun as well. We're going to talk about all the things that it means to be a successful female leader in the local government space. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm just excited to share this virtual space with the panelists that are at all different stages of their leadership journey. And we're going to talk to them kind of about what it took to get there, how they're doing, and what they've learned along the way. And I'm just so excited that you've joined us. So on this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the tech overview and housekeeping. Before we get started, just make sure everyone's all set up with this webinar technology. So as you may have noticed, you've been placed on mute, and you will be on mute for the duration of this panel discussion. But you do want this to be an interactive conversation, so we're going to ask you to type any questions you have into the Q&A box at any time during the discussion, and we'll either ask it while we're on the discussion or during that Q&A. Your lines are going to be on mute the whole time, but we still want to know who's in the virtual room with us today. So we're going to open up the chat box for a few moments. So we will allow you to tell us a little bit about yourselves. We'll give you a few minutes to give us your name, your organization, and your location so we know who we're spending our time with. And we'll open up that chat right now and give you the chance to write that name and organization in the chat box while you're getting settled so that we can see a little bit more about you. Welcome. I see some great people from all over the state. Thank you so much. All right. So first of all, on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about ILG and why we're doing this conversation. We're happy that you found us and that you were able to register for this session, but we know that in local government, there are a lot of changes in local government and a lot of new faces and new people joining the ranks of public service. And so we just wanted to take a little bit of time to share a little bit about our organization and what we're really passionate about. So we are a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization, and that's really passionate about supporting local government. We are the nonprofit affiliate of the League of California Cities, CSAC, and the California Special Districts Association. So we're connected to about 2,500 cities, counties, and special districts all over the state. They focus on advocacy and working in the Capitol to affect legislation and policy, but our focus at ILG is just a little bit different. We really want to help you tackle the problems on the ground. We do education and training, and we provide the practical and easy to use resources so you can do your jobs day in and day out. The next slide speaks a little bit about our programs and services. It covers everything from leadership and governance to public engagement and civics education and sustainability. So if your agency is struggling with any of those issues in those areas, we hope you'll think of ILG as a possible resource for you. We do everything from informational panels and webinars like this one to some of the more comprehensive trainings like our public engagement workshops or even our customized trainings around leadership or governance or climate. Today's conversation actually falls in a couple buckets that are on this slide. It's very squarely in the leadership realm, but it's also acutely connected to our work in workforce development. You know, you may know this, of course, if you're in local government, you know that local governments are facing what a lot of employers are facing after COVID, which is this major shift in the workplace dynamics. And as we think about the future of our local government sector and the people who are going to do the important work of governing and leading our communities, we have to ask, you know, what's going to make people want to run for office or stay employed at a local agency? And then you have to ask that additional layer of questions about how can we help make sure that women in particular are adequately represented, equitably represented in local governments too, and not just as staff, but also as leaders at the senior levels and certainly at the elected and appointed levels as well. Next slide, please. So there's a recent national survey that we found that says that fewer than 1 in 3 of the top appointed executives in local government are women, despite women making up 47% of the workforce. And progress is definitely being made, and it's being made and has been slowly since about 2013. But at the current rate, gender parity isn't expected to be reached until about 2048. And then we also know that there are other factors that impact whether women even consider roles in local government or if they stay in local government. The next slide talks about a recent KPMG survey that said that 75% of women across all industries report experiencing imposter syndrome in their roles, despite having the right amount of education, certifications, and maybe even the right training to do their jobs well. And that certainly resonates with me, as it might with you. At ILG, we started the Leading Local webinar series to tackle some tough issues and the sticky topics. And this topic is such a great way to dig deep and to kind of hear from women leaders and those who have charted their own paths to be authentic and effective leaders in local government, and talk about things like imposter syndrome and how they got where they got, things they might do differently, right? And how we can learn from their experiences. The next slide gives us a snapshot at our panelists. Before they come on the camera, I'm just so excited to be joined today by 4 incredible women from all over the state. They're representing staff, elected officials, and just this variety of jurisdiction types and sizes. In alphabetical order from left to right, we have Michelle Beal-Bonnery. She is the city attorney for the city of Pasadena. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle. We have Rhonda Dugan. She's a supervisor and the 2023 board chair of Mono County. Welcome, Rhonda. We have Rebecca Scott. She is the Director of Operations for the City of Citrus Heights Water District, Special District, and we're so glad to have her representation today. And then last but not least, Dr. Nancy Young is the Mayor of the City of Tracy in the Central Valley. I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and ask them to come on the camera today and begin our discussion as we drop down that slide deck. So these women have absolutely incredible bios, absolutely incredible stories, and I really can't do them justice. I'd love to just make sure that each one of them have the opportunity to tell us about themselves. So we're just going to go in order, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to spend about a minute sharing a little bit about yourself with our audience, just to ground us in your own journey, and let us know who you are. And if we can, let's go ahead and start with Michelle.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you everyone for joining, and to our panelists for sharing whatever experiences we get today. I am Michelle Beal-Bonnery, and I am the city attorney, city prosecutor for the city of Pasadena. And I've been in my role in Pasadena for 25, going on 26 years. And prior to that, I was with the law firm of Richards, Watson & Gershon, and I was a partner there. And while there, I was city attorney for the city of Monrovia. And before that, I guess I'm going in reverse chronological order. I attended UC Berkeley Law School, which at the time was called Boalt Hall. And I think we're going back and forth with what we're calling it, but that's what it was when I was there. For law school, and I went to Stanford University for undergrad and majored in international relations. And I will go back, I'm from Los Angeles, and I went to Crenshaw High School and was raised in South Los Angeles. And it's interesting when I say Crenshaw High School, I went to Dakar, Senegal last year and was on a boat, and a guy had on a shirt that had Crenshaw on it, which was the same as a jersey for the basketball players. He spoke French, I spoke English, and it was just amazing that around the world, Crenshaw, people know about Crenshaw. I don't know if any of you do, but it has its own history. And I raised that because it wasn't likely that someone who didn't know any lawyers, saw Perry Mason on TV, that kind of thing, would end up in a position that I'm in. I didn't really have any role models in the professional career. Of course, I had successful business women in my family, as well as I was raised 2 parents in the household. So I had a very solid background, and that served as a foundation for me to feel that I could do anything that I put my mind to. And whether I could or not, I believed it. And so I was making things happen. And as a result, I'm currently the longest serving city attorney in the city of Pasadena's history. And, you know, you look at me back years, decades back, it would not be expected to see a Black woman in that role. And I think it shows that whatever our backgrounds, you know, you look at the president, the vice president, everybody's come from different backgrounds, but they're able to overcome whatever the challenges are. So that's a little bit about my professional background, and I guess more can come up as we speak.
I love that, Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Crenshaw has a very strong brand recognition, very strong, I think, legacy. So really, really excited to hear about that and hear that that's kind of your story. And we're going to hear more. We're going to hear more. And thank you so much. Let's see who's next. I think we have Supervisor Dugan. You're up.
Good morning, Erica, and thank you very much for having me. This is such an honor to be with so many people here discussing how we got here, why we're here, and what we want to do in the future. I am the chair of the Mono County Supervisors this year. This is my third year of my first term. We say that the first one, right? So to see how far we want to go. And things along here. I've been 35 years in the Eastern Sierra, and Mono County is on the east side of about the center of the state, close to Nevada. We are the gateway to Yosemite on the east side, and also we are home to Mammoth Mountain Ski Area, who just have recorded their biggest snowfall ever at 104 inches on the top of the mountain. That's plenty. We'll have snow for anybody that still wants to see it all year long. And I come from my 35 years here, a resort and rural and remote area, but it's worth every bit of it. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And when I decided to do this a few years ago, it sounded like such a good idea in 2019 to run for office, but I realized that I wanted to continue to help my community after nearly 30 years in the hospitality industry here, and then coming from Southern California in the retail industry. It was always trying to solve problems and deal with people, and realizing that maybe I could help in local government, and the opportunity came along, and I wanted to give that a try, and came in during the time of COVID, and now during, you know, one of the greatest winters that California's ever seen, and how to deal with a new disaster every day, but keep going and bring your own weather to whatever situation you have. There's snow on the ground outside, but it's a sunny day, and just how we're going to continue to work together solve our problems, and I wanted to help. So that's what I still want to do today. And I'm really thrilled to be here with everyone and hear their stories and maybe share some of my own.
I love that, Supervisor Dugan. Thank you so much for being here. Rebecca, please share a little bit about yourself in the Citrus Heights Water District.
Hi, everyone. I was actually born and raised in a city near Citrus Heights. We're about half an hour northeast of Sacramento. And for college, I moved to Southern California and ended up staying down there for about 20 years, where I got my bachelor's degree and master's degree. Out of college, really didn't know what I wanted to do, and found a flyer actually at the college job center for a management trainee with the city. And I thought, you know what, it was in Parks and Recreation, sounded like a lot of fun. I went for that. It was a limited term position, but it was a blast. One of my very first tasks was playing Wendy in an Arbor Day themed skit that we did for all of the elementary schools in the city, and it was just so much fun. From there, I went to communications positions for the city of La Mirada and then Cerritos. And we did about 6 years into my communications position in Cerritos, we had a retirement in the Public Works, Water and Power Department. And I was called into my director's office and basically told that the city manager wanted me to take that position. So had no experience with public works or water and power, but it sounded like a lot of fun. So I moved down to that department and was their management analyst. During that time, got married, had kids, realized it would be awesome to be back up in Northern California with family and friends and aunts and uncles and cousins. And so my husband and I moved back in 2019 when I was hired as the senior management analyst for the Citrus Heights Water District. And then I was promoted to the director of operations about 2 years ago in 2021. And I will explain more about that promotion and when we get to some of the other questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Dr. Young, would you like to close us out with your background?
Now I feel even more connected to all the ladies because everybody has something connected to Southern California. And so that's where my journey actually began. I was born and raised in Compton, California. And so, but when I was in high school, I moved to San Fernando High and I ended up coming up to UC Berkeley to go to school. And then the rest of my life has been in Northern California ever since that. I am currently the mayor for the city of Tracy. And I'm really excited because in the 145-year history of Tracy, I am the very first elected female mayor, and I am the very first African-American mayor for the city of Tracy. And so I was elected as a council member back in 2012, elected first as mayor in 2020, and recently re-elected. We have term limits, so I'm on my last term as the mayor for the city of Tracy. I also sit on the Cal Cities board, and that's how I met Erica. I am really excited because all of my background, everything really connects to my passion and my love for people. And so that really stems from ministry. My pastor in South Central LA growing up was a lady, Pastor Pearlie Peterson. And then my mom became a minister. And then I was preaching from the age of 11 myself. And so I never felt limited. I never felt limited as to what I could do as a female, as a person, because I saw it mirrored in front of me. And so not knowing exactly what I wanted to do besides elementary school, I was like, okay, you know what, I'll be the president of the United States. Even here in Washington, D.C., where I am now, as I was walking through the halls of Congress, I was like, I definitely do not want to be the president of the United States. They could not pay me, hand me the role. I'm like, no, thank you, because it's such a different level and we can get so much more done at the local level. And I'm really excited about that opportunity. I feel like the lady I used to see on TV that said, I am my children's mom, because that is me. I've been, there front and center for the growth of my children. I'm thrilled to have 4 adult children now, 4 children that inherited that are really, really grown. And then now 7 grandchildren combined for the 8 of them. So I am just thrilled to, be in this position. My background is really mentorship. I love mentoring young people and people alongside me, ahead of me in just different capacities. And I love drawing from others because you can always learn from others. So I'm just kind of like, a multifaceted person, but I'm sure as we get along in this conversation, I'll get to share a little bit more about me. Thank you for having me here today.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. All of you, as you can see why this panel is pulled together, absolutely incredible background experience and just so much to glean from. We're going to siphon as much information as we can from you. We're going to dive into the questions and we've got a few of them. So maybe 1 or 2 of you will answer each one, but I would love to hear, I got some inspiration from Nancy about sort of kind of what that inner drive that she had to just do whatever. She felt like she could always achieve what she put her mind to. For maybe Rebecca and Michelle, because you're both in the staff level, what do you think has been the biggest factor that has helped you be successful in your roles, especially in local government, where it can be a little bit of different industry?
For me, it's by far humility, admitting what I do not know and being a lifelong learner and being open to learn what I do not know. I was the first female director of operations in our district's 101-year history. I went into the role with a little bit of the imposter syndrome, which we'll talk about later, but truly went in there saying, look, you guys all are amazing at what you do and you know what to do. Now teach me how you do it, because I'm not going to come in on day 1 and say, everybody do something different. So that's a huge one for me, and self-learning too, being aware of where your own weaknesses and strengths are and making sure you have people around you who excel in those areas where you might be weaker. And so that you can, they can compliment you and you can compliment them and also learn from them.
That is phenomenal advice. Thank you. Michelle, what do you have?
And I'll start where Rebecca ended, with surrounding yourself with good people. With people, because Pasadena is a big, complex city. It's not a big city, but it's got big problems. And so it's kind of a medium-sized city, I guess, but we have all of the aspects that you would find in larger organizations. So obviously I don't know it all. I try to get people who, like me, are positive as much as possible, because I think that has been one of the big factors for me in my success, is that I try to find whatever the positive aspect is about something rather than the negative. And if there is a problem, how do we get around it? How do we address whatever the problem is to get to a solution? And I think I'm appointed by the city council. So I think over the years, decades, I guess now, and different councils, I think by and large, they see that and they want that to continue. So I have people who know a lot and fill my gaps. And as I continue to practice, I find there are more gaps because things change. So I think that and the feeling of bouncing back when there are setbacks, and knowing that, yes, there's a setback, but I can overcome that and deal with it, and get to success again if it's on something else. So I think that has helped with a feeling of being successful, if you want to use that term, in what I've been doing for the past few decades. And it occurred to me, I've been practicing law nearly 40 years now.
Wow,
which
congratulations.
is weird.
That's absolutely amazing. And I think it speaks to the fact that the fact that you just realized that means that time has been going very quickly.
Yeah,
You must have been having some kind of fun doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
love
I think so. And speaking of children, I mean, I have 3 children, all of whom are adults, but the time is flying. No grandchildren yet, but I guess that'll come at some point. But it does remind us that we have multifacets in our lives, and we can be successful in each of those in different forms.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's a great segue into what I was going to ask our electeds, because you have to choose to run for office. You have to choose to do this work. And certainly there are people that are interested in transitioning into that type of role in their careers, or maybe already are public servants on the line. How are you balancing this, this public service responsibility with your personal life and whatever other passions you might have, and maybe your career if you're doing that as well? How are you doing all of those things and still wearing the hat of mayor or wearing the hat of supervisor? Maybe Rhonda, would you like to start us off, and then we'll go to Nancy?
Thank you. Well, this is a choice, and you remind yourself every day that, yes, you chose to be doing this, but you don't necessarily choose what is happening there. And one of the things that we were talking about regarding imposter syndrome is one of the biggest challenges is going from something you really know and you're an expert in the field to something you may think you know. And then you get in and find out how little you know. And that's okay, because you have a learning curve, and don't ever give that up. And the way that you are able to transition and be the most effective is by you listen and you read and you learn everything you can, because this is the time you're not supposed to be an expert, but you're supposed to listen to the people, listen to those that are there to assist you. And that's how you learn and become more confident in making your decisions there. And balance is a real challenge for an elected official, because you feel at certain times that you have to be there available 24/7, especially right now when we're experiencing so many issues regarding the weather and the state of emergency. My county has been in the state of emergency for 3 months, and it's ongoing. And every day we wake up to something we did not expect, but we have to deal with it. And to make sure that you don't feel that you are the only one that can solve it and the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You're there to listen and help facilitate and allow others to come to the decisions that you need to make there. And you're there to assist. It's not all on you. You're part of the team at that time, and really lean on each other, because that's what gets everyone through.
I love it. What about you, Mayor?
You know, life is a balancing act. And so when I think about or recount the different things that I was a part of since I was in elementary school, you just think I was insane. But I've been able to balance a lot of things in my life. But it's really, really important to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries that you do not allow to be crossed. When I had my family nights, you know, I was like, okay, this is my time with my family. And when I'm out and about, because my husband and I have been in ministry for so many years, we know how to multitask and be able to be, you know, kind, generous, even of our time and attention when we meet other people. To be able to, my family, my kids grew up knowing this, you know, about us, and they're kind of like that themselves now, to talking to everybody around, just, you know, being.
They got that from you.
Yeah, they did. And so they don't think they're like me, but then you watch them, it's like, oh my goodness, you are so much like me and your dad. But the reality of it is, you know, my kids grew up. I was thinking about this in 2012. My youngest son was 12. And so, but when I started going to council meetings, it was 2008. So my youngest son was 8. He is now 22, going on 23, and my oldest is 30. So they got to, you know, grow up in this with us as a part of this, but they also grew up with us in ministry, like I said, setting up for church, breaking down. So they're used to being a part of the community. So it hasn't been, you know, a hardship, but, you know, being able to have that balance, like, or I'm still here in DC for a couple extra days to take time with my husband, to take time with my daughter, who now lives in Alexandria because she came to Howard 9 years ago and she lives here, you know, to be able to have that family time. I think it's really important to have that. Now, when I started going to council meetings 4 years before I ran and was elected, I went just to learn what was going on in my city. I was not the one going up to the dais. I literally took a notebook with me, and I was a fixture in that audience. I spoke once in 4 years at the podium, and then I didn't speak again until I was actually on the council. And even though you can learn some things, it is very different when you're on the other side of the dais. And being able to take the time, as the last supervisor just spoke, as far as hearing from people. But then I think, you know, part of it too is where I am in life. Now being in my 50s is way different than when I was in my 20s, when I think you know a lot, you think you know a lot more when you're in your 20s. But by the time you see your 50s and older, it's like, you know, I don't really know as much as I thought, but being able to have that discernment, to be able to hear and to understand. I just joined a new board recently, but as I sat there and I learned that even though I hadn't been on there for a long time, I know a lot of components that goes into making decisions. And it can't just be, you know, I'm brand new, I don't understand this, no, I'm going to vote no against it. But being able to draw on those who have that institutional knowledge, to be able to decipher different pieces of things that are just, that should be taken into account, to know the questions to ask. See,
know what you don't know, right? Ask people, like, what is it? What can I, and you mentioned this too, Rebecca, about having the humility to go, I need to know what I don't know. I need to ask other people. I need to hear and listen. Yeah. I love that.
You don't have to act like you know everything either. Yeah. If I'm even in a community and somebody asks me a question, if I know the answer, I'll give it to them. If I don't know, say, you know what, I don't know, but let me look into that and I'll get back with you on that. It's honesty. It's honesty. People trust you when you just authentically who you are.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Rebecca, you've got 2 small children at home. How are you balancing all of the work you do in Citrus Heights?
That's a good question. I really don't know.
That's an authentic answer right there.
Frankly, as I think Dr. Young was saying, definitely boundaries. You know, I really have in place set boundaries of like, okay, how many events that I am asked to attend do I really need to attend? And so I go to, you know, board meetings and things like that. But as far as like extracurricular weekend, evenings, nights, I really try and kind of put those hard boundaries in of what's absolutely essential. And if it's an optional, then typically I may not attend. And then when I get home, just spending time with the kids for, even if it's like 10 minutes, like 5 or 10 minutes when I'm home. They haven't seen me all day. I haven't seen them all day. And just kind of getting a little bit of quality time with them. Even if the rest of the evening is crazy, you know, they've got to see me for a little bit. And then on nights when we do have like board meetings, I will typically leave a little bit early go pick them up from school, where normally I would not be able to, pick them up from school in the afternoon, have a few hours with them before the board meeting, and then they know I'm, heading out in the evening to go do that. But it is definitely tough. My youngest one's 5 and she's a pistol, so I'm still learning how to parent every day, but it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know that Dr. Young mentioned something about like she's 50 now and what she knows at 50. And, she wishes she, could talk to her 25-year-old self. Very, very different. I want to lean into that a little bit. And I want to ask Michelle if you had some advice to give your 25-year-old self, or anybody that maybe is at a stage in their career that's a little younger, or maybe at a different stage than you are. What advice would you give to the person that you used to be?
Interesting, for some reason, the word, and maybe it's because I'm on the other end, the word that popped up was retirement. And so I remember when I was in my 20s and we were looking at benefits and things, and I didn't understand, didn't care about retirement because that was so far away. So I didn't need to put anything toward retirement. And so looking back, I would have told myself, well, no, you need to start planning now for 40 years from now, basically, or whatever, some people retire 50, 55, 60, 65, they're getting older, but that's one thing. And then just the other thing is that you're going to face some challenges and you will overcome them. And sometimes when we're in the midst of it, it seems like, how am I going to get, I'm not going to make it through this. I need to start looking for a job or whatever it is. And I remember one time I was talking with my staff, I said, I feel like a pimple that I'm being pushed on every end and I just need to burst,
Oh my God.
It's like, so, but I take a step back and I take a deep breath. And yes, Dr. Young, I pray. My husband's a minister as well. So I've been a first lady and all that stuff, but I have to take a step back. And so at 25, I would remind myself that when you experience those challenges, both at home and in the workplace, know that through different methods that you can use, you will get through them and you will overcome them and you'll be ready for the next one. So those are two things that kind of came to my mind.
I love that.
When you asked that.
Thank you, Michelle. What about you, Rhonda?
Oh, I just love this question. It just made me laugh. What would you tell your 25-year-old self? Oh my God, I would tell her to be quiet and listen more. When you're young and you're passionate about something, you just want to jump in and participate. And sometimes those waters are not what you thought they are. Nobody listens to you. You think nobody listens to you and things, and it can be very frustrating. But what you now figure out is I'm at the age when most people are retiring. And I'm going, wait a minute, why did I think I could do it? Why am I energized enough to think that I can keep going on at this? And it's because I actually did learn more than I thought I was learning at that time. Is those experiences, what Michelle had talked about, they're preparing you for what is ahead. And at the time, the drama and just the angst that you feel as you go through these things are things you look back now and go, that was nothing. Look what we have been through. Look what we were going to go through. Had we known, we probably, a lot of people would go, I don't think I can take any more. You don't know what you can take. And everything that we've experienced, especially in the last 5 years, or maybe somebody in a long-term career, and just there's got to be something more. It's to prepare you for what's ahead and to keep you going, because we have no idea what's ahead. I was an analyst, and what I did is I looked into the future regarding finances or trends, and what we learned 3 years ago is nothing prepared us for this, other than the ability to keep going on and keep embracing it and try to find the balance in your life and keep it going, because we now know that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And we all want to finish this. And you're going to have highs and lows. And we don't know if we're at mile 22 right now. We hope we are.
Yeah.
Could not be, but at mile 22 is when you lose a lot of people in the race. And it's been a real challenge to decide how much more you can take after this. And every day you wake up and think, what's going to get me to across the finish line, is realizing I'm just getting started. So I started late. That's okay. It's my 4th career. And that's just, we'll see how far it goes. I wish I'd started earlier, but I wouldn't be the person, and hopefully now the leader that I thought I was then. Now I know I can be.
I really appreciate that. It's like it's almost like you're saying to appreciate the journey. It's like you want to have done some things differently in the past, but in reality, you wouldn't be who you are now if you hadn't gone through all the things you went through before. And I know certainly if you think back, 5, 10, 25 years, you go, oh, the thing that was just going to tear you down and break you at the time is the thing that helped you become who you are now, certainly give you the strength and the resilience and the experience to survive whatever comes next. And I think one thing that you might all agree is, and certainly in what I've seen when I think about the women in my life, the women that I come in contact with, and so many that I admire, there is an innate ability to be resilient, to be adaptable, to address whatever comes and then just handle it and make it to the next stage. And I really appreciated something somebody said about like giving everybody a little bit of grace. You're going to mess up sometimes, but you got to keep going. And certainly that's something life lesson we can have, I think, for our personal lives, for our careers and everything in the middle. Let's get back to kind of local government, right? And just how you all kind of connect to the local government space, and work-related advice you can share with the people on the line today about, what they can maybe take back. What's some advice that you might have been given that really helped you in your career journey? Have you ever gotten any pieces or nuggets of information that just really been assistance for you and really helped? And I'll start with the 2 people that are on staff that maybe can help as people are navigating their careers. What's something that you've gotten? And then I'll open it up to the others as well, because you're also, this isn't your career, but it's certainly you have careers outside of government. What are some advices you could give to the panelists, from the panelists to our audience today?
I guess I'll jump in here. One thing that comes to mind is doing more than you are expected to do or asked to do. So we used to have this thing called an above and beyond award, and it was a frog, actually. We would pass around. We're trying to come up with ways to inspire and motivate people. But the key is going above and beyond whatever the expectation is. And in doing that, and at least for me as a lawyer in particular, it's paying attention to detail and doing our able best. And I remember Glenn Watson, who was the named partner at Richards, Watson and Gershon. I really feel like I learned to write at that law firm, because I would give him stuff and it would come back all marked up, just red all over the place. And after some years, he was like, you really do a good resolution, basically, of what he was looking at, an ordinance. And so it's like, well, I didn't start like that, but I took the constructive criticism and I developed from that. And so it caused me to really look for detail and pay attention to detail as one of those, when people are looking for employees, that's what they say they want to look for. And then the last thing I'll mention is asking questions. And you referenced it, but it's okay to ask questions. And sometimes people feel that they would be viewed as not knowing enough or stupid or dumb or whatever. It's like, we always say there are no dumb questions. And then sometimes people feel, well, so-and-so got in trouble for asking too many questions. because they really didn't know. So, but it's important and more important to ask and find out than to not ask and make the error, in my opinion.
That's great.
So those are a few things that come to mind in terms of advice that I've gotten over the years. And those were things that were told to me at different stages in my career.
Thank you. What about you,
It's-
Rebecca?
Can I?
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
And so, because I was really thinking about that whole 25-year-old kind of thing, and at 16, really going back to 16 years old too. But one of the things, and I'll say both because it still has to do with work and everything too. And my pastor used to always say, keep living. And I did not really get that. I was always perplexed by that phrase, keep living. Because as a young person, I was in a hurry to grow up. But you see things very differently when you get older. And as you get older, from different perspectives. And as a mom trying to tell my son and with his son, things are very different. Some things you don't have to take so seriously. And so, but one piece of advice that I would say too, and I say to my kids too, to know your value, to know your worth. Because when you're working at a job, you can go above and beyond, which I've done for many, many years. And you take on a lot of things that is not in your job description in hopes of really proving yourself. But many companies, and sadly, they don't see you for who you are and what you do, just depending on the skin that you're in and the outfit that you're in, whatever it looks like, you hit those ceilings. And so for my daughter now who works here, she literally had to quit her job and apply for another job to make twice as much as she was making at the last job, because she had to know her value, her worth, and to show that, to display that. And so sometimes we get stuck somewhere in trying to prove something to someone who don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And so we waste time.
I appreciate that balance between, you give as much as you can, but know when enough is enough, right? And know what you're worth so that you're not feeling like getting taken advantage of in any workplace too. I love that. Rebecca, did you want to answer part of this one before we move on to our next one?
Sure. I actually just completed a year-long leadership program through a water JPIA. And one of the phrases that just really stuck with me from that program was just the short phrase, people first, mission always. And just remembering that whatever we are doing, rather than thinking about, how can we be more productive? How can we do more sales, whatever it is, it's realizing, that the people come first before any of that other stuff. So treating them with dignity and respect, respecting their time. They have family, friends, hobbies, just like you do. And just trying to have that empathy for them, leave time for small chit chat sometimes, ask people how their weekends and days are going, and just remember that, they matter more than the work. And if they are valued, then the work will come and they will have more pride in the work that they're doing. And then the other thing, real quick, I would say is don't close yourself off to industries or jobs that you think you may not enjoy and or you don't feel that they're your talent areas. A lot of strengths can cross over to a variety of industries and jobs. I never thought I'd be working for a water utility, let alone a director of operations. So ironically, the high school ASVAB test said I should be a ship captain, and I laughed and laughed, and now I'm not super far off. But if you're like an analyst or a generalist, obviously those skills can transfer anywhere, but you might end up in a place you might not have thought you would enjoy, but you might get there and realize you actually do enjoy it. So don't close yourself off to those opportunities or industries.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, because I think it's just keeping your options open and just being open to considering all different categories of work. Certainly local government has a sector within sectors. And so you've got so many different opportunities. You started in communications. And so so many agencies have so many different categories of work that you can do within it. You don't necessarily have to leave the entire public sector to do some of the things that you're passionate about. I really appreciate that there's so much opportunity in local government. Certainly our passion at ILG is to make sure that we have a great next generation of public sector leaders, either at the appointed and the staff level. And so we want to support that and figure out how to make sure we have more people in leadership across the board. Do you, kind of related to this, and I don't know who's best to answer this question. I think it could be probably good for people at all levels, but there are undoubtedly some power structures in local government. And I think maybe we even lean in a little bit as women here on this answer. Can you give our audience any tips for navigating the power structures in local government as a woman, and maybe as a woman on the rise? How do you do that delicately? How do you do that effectively, especially when maybe the people in those structures, whether they're above or around you, don't necessarily have the same style as you, maybe not the same perspectives, maybe not even the same politics if you're elected? Any tips you have for those that are listening and watching today about how you might navigate those as women, some things that have worked for you?
I don't want to just jump in. I was waiting for somebody else to say something. It's almost like waiting for a first and a second. But as far as, I think the important thing is that everybody has a voice. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, what kind of knowledge you have, what position you lie in. When you value people as people and know that everybody along the chain has something that's important to add, then that's when you begin to get some real input to help you, to help them. When you're about customer service too, when it's about the people and trying to do the best for one another, then you're able to build up one another as you are built up. And so I just think that no matter where it is, whether you're trying to get somewhere or whether you're trying to help somebody else get there, or whether you're just trying to come up with a solution, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be the boss of everything. You can be in the background and allow others to bring solutions or pieces of the solution. I just think being open and having a heart to just hear people wherever they are and value every voice.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else want to try for this one?
You know, there's an interesting dynamic with being an elected official is you are the voice of the people. And a lot of times they don't know who to talk to. Yes, there's a website. Yes, it tells you everything that you need, but I've had constituents tell me this, well, why would I go there? That's what you do for me. Okay, so what you can use that to your advantage and your strength is when you're dealing with departments that you may know nothing about and you have long-term experts in it, and they do it this way for several reasons. Either it works or it's always been done, or nobody's giving them the luxury, whatever the reason, to do something different. But you are asking the question that the public's asking because they hear and see things differently. And a staff or department head may not deal with the public, but then it gives you the ability to ask your question and say, I am doing this on behalf, this is what they want to know. And a lot of times department heads have thought, I don't look at it that way at all. I've never seen that. Nobody has ever brought that up. It's because you're doing it from a level of expertise and they're just looking on the outside, and looking in and trying to ask these questions. So what that also does is give you the ability to not tell somebody how they're doing their job. It's asking, what is the result of this? And it can give you a lot of ability to work with teams. I do not have a staff. There's, it's me, it's in my district, but I look at everybody that is on the county staff as, well, you are my staff. You're my resource to get questions asked. I'm not there to tell you how to do your job, but I'm there to be the liaison for the public, for the people, and find out and get these questions answered for them. Then they could actually maybe feel more confident of talking to the public works director and saying, here's my situation. Am I looking at it this way correctly? Community development, how do I do this? Where they are very reluctant to go and do that. And when you also are dealing with someone, the first thing out of their mouth is, I pay my taxes, so I get to call all the shots. I pay my taxes too. I pay a lot more than I thought I was going to pay, but that's a whole nother story. But I am a consumer, a user as well. But I also know that my taxes, I had a luxury of knowing my taxes don't cover everything that it is, but what are the important things there? And I, as an elected official, want to make sure that we're doing the work of the public.
Mhm.
because we can balance our budget, but if we're not spending it on the right things, have we achieved our mission? So is you're working with the other departments of something you know nothing about to get the respect of your position? Yes, they call you honorable, you know, for if that's what it is there. But that's where we can really thrive in working within and making them that you're the partner. You're there to work with the public and have the voice there that allows them to do their job.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we'll just wrap this one with Michelle, because you're coming from a staff perspective. Any thoughts on navigating those power structures in local government as a staff member?
Yeah, and I kind of feel like Rebecca said when you asked her, how does she manage and balance? And she says, I don't really know. Well, I kind of don't know. Because, and it's interesting, at one of our staff events, we had this thing where you pick a person and you use one word to describe that person. So the person who pulled my name said the word for me was resilient. And so I guess I took it as a compliment, you know, it is, but it is, well, how did I get to be that way? And I'll go back to the positive perspective of things, and kind of borrowing from what Nancy and Rhonda have said in terms of value and respect everyone, from the guy sweeping out on the walkway to the mayor to the, you know, chief of the operating company, whatever it is, you respect and value them and their input. And I think that shows. And when you're dealing with the electeds, you know, you have to value what they say. And sometimes I have to say, well, no, you can't do that. And they want to do it, and they might get upset, or they disagree, and they think I'm wrong. I happen to have 4 lawyers on the council, by the way, out of 8. So, so that can become a challenge. But saying, you know, you raise a good point. Let me see if there's a way we can achieve your goal in a lawful manner, in an ethical manner, because we answer to the public. We answer to more than just, you know, the other side in a lawsuit or other employees. We answer to a multitude of those in the community who have varying perspectives. So trying to, I guess, navigate those challenges with figuring out a way to accomplish an end that's appropriate and that's, you know, doable to some extent, and recognizing that their input is important and everyone's role is critical and should be respected. And I think that shows when you have that perspective. So I think that has led to my resiliency in over the years.
I really appreciate that. I think I'm hearing from all of you that it's a lot about, you know, listening to all the sides, getting all the perspectives, and then realizing, okay, I might have some other way to think about this, but then also being able to acknowledge that, you know, there's maybe some other opportunities to change this perspective or that perspective, but feeling a little bit too like, you have your own expertise. And you mentioned something, Michelle, that just jumped out at me. You know, you're an attorney and you have been for, you know, many, many years doing a great job, but you're surrounded by people that may or may not know their thing as well. They have credentials. And we talked about almost imposter syndrome. And we talked about the idea that women that are highly qualified still have this perception that they are not good enough at their jobs, or they're maybe not qualified for their jobs, or they shouldn't be in the role that they're in. And it prevents us from applying for jobs. It prevents us from speaking up sometimes, or feeling successful. And I know that sometimes it's because they're chipped away at, their perspectives and opinions and expertise might be questioned. And I wonder if any of you have experienced that. And I wonder if any of you, how you deal with that, because I think there is a little bit of that. And there certainly is some questions in the chat about that. Are there ways that you have navigated the experience where people are questioning your intellect, potentially your expertise, your approach to things, the way you're doing it, and maybe it's because of your gender, maybe it's just your personality type or the way that you communicate, for whatever reason, people are questioning your thoughts on things. How do you deal with that in your environment and your experience?
So I guess I'll
You wanna
finish.
start us off? Finish it up.
Start off with that.
Yeah.
Because I have, and like I said, there have been council members who basically give their perspective and want the other council members to listen to, they say, well, no, but I'm not the city attorney, she's the city attorney, but basically ignore what she's saying and listen to me. And so in that setting, I think I do feel and question my abilities, and it probably does go back to when I was in elementary school. I don't know, I would know the answer and I'm scared to raise my hand because maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
Know? And so over time, I've overcome that, but it's taken, decades to overcome that. But in the situation, I say, well, I respect what you're saying, but we need to consider this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like, with all due respect, I don't agree with you, and I'm the one, I don't say it that way because I have more humility than that, I guess. But some people would just say it. It's like, well, no, I'm the city attorney, and you my advice is what you should follow. So it's all how to manage that communication, and it does develop, I think, internal. We've talked about barriers, kind of. Well, the question was potentially posed about barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they become self-imposed barriers.
Mm-hmm.
That, well, maybe I should hold off, or maybe, and it's important to, be accurate as much as possible. But we're all human and we make mistakes. And so we try to limit those mistakes and do whatever research or whatever we need for that. So I guess, yes, I have felt that. I didn't know what that term was until now.
You felt it, but you've experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived it.
And you did mention that it might have come from years and years and years of feeling like you didn't want to not know the answer, right? That idea that you want to know, you want to be right, you don't want to make a mistake. And I think a lot of people, I certainly feel that way a lot of times. And it can come from a lot of factors, but it can be exacerbated even at any age and at any stage of your career. Anyone else want to tackle that one before we move on to the next question? Yeah.
Nancy, and I want to say something from an elected perspective and utilizing staff, because I truly believe that staff are experts and know a lot of things that we need. However, and I don't know the particular lawyer in Pasadena, and I'm sure she's wonderful. She's been there for many years. We have some challenges in my city, and we've gone through, I'm probably on my 5th attorney since I've been on the council. And I have a different type of attorney right now. And certain things are advice, absolutely. Some things are advice, and that we can look at, and it just depends on the context of the advice that we take. And there's other things that may come forth that are an interpretation of something. And especially because I have the historical context for how things are, there's even been things that I've helped put into place. And so I can explain, this is what we were getting at and why we did this and why this is written this way. No, that is not how I see that. That is not what that means. That's a whole different things on advice. So it's a battle. It's become a battle within my city. So, but as far as, I wouldn't envy you at all the place being an attorney and having 4 attorneys. We have 1 attorney that's on our council, but he's not combative, very respectful of the position of our attorney and from a legal perspective. But it's when you cross over to other things that make it a challenge. And so that's what it becomes, a challenge between a battle between not just the council and staff, but even when you get input from our community, or you have a set group of community members that are always speaking forward, and they like superimpose like anything that they say because their community member means anything more than the council. That's problematic. And then when you have people that they've encouraged to help get in positions on the council, and then they're saying, well, the community is saying this. It's not all the community is not saying this. Your 2-3 people, community people in this audience right now is saying that. But I have a balance against thousands of other people that we communicate with. So I think part of the thing is really being able to articulate the way that you come to your decisions on things and bringing in historical context. But at the same time, for some people who are just stuck on whatever they're going to say, they're going to just be stuck. They're going to be stuck there, period. They don't want to hear. The staff can even present things that are exact data things, but they're going to still override the data. They're going to override all the other content. So the best that we can do, though, is to articulate, not just say no because we said no, because I've had council members that said that before, but to be able to articulate what the issue is, what the challenges are, and even taking into account the advice and what we're going to do from that. But it does become a hardship when different people are posturing and they ignore the data, or they utilize their few people, their 3 voices versus the masses and the history behind other decisions, how we've gotten to places. So it's not cut and dry, and you have good people on both sides. So.
Absolutely.
And I feel I need to clarify, even all of my council members are very respectful of me and that kind of thing. So I don't want it to appear, and who knows, I want to make it clear that I wasn't saying that. I'm just saying that in the past, there have been times when my advice has been questioned.
Yeah.
And we do try to present it in a manner that is very thorough, and people, like the doctor just said, they're stuck on, this is where I'm going to go.
Right.
And that's the answer. So that has happened, but all of my council members are very respectful of me.
And that's one of the things in government too, and I think that makes it even more tricky, is that you have to be able to have civil discourse for government to even work well, for policy to work, for governing to work, for leadership to work. You've got to be able to have conversations that are really hard, and how you have those conversations, how you communicate, how you explain your decision-making process is super critical. And it's so it can make the difference between being effective or completely devolving into something that's chaotic. I do want to uplift something that popped into the Q&A that I think is aligned really nicely with this imposter syndrome conversation, because it's a big issue. We didn't even dive into it. It's a little bit about your individual experiences, but it's a lot about a systemic thing that we've identified, and research even suggests. And somebody in the chat mentioned that it's important to recognize, and I'll just read it because it's great. It's important to also recognize with imposter syndrome that the base of the systems we operate in today were historically built around men in power, and then over time women have risen and the career opportunities have opened up. So while we may feel like imposters, it's important to also recognize women are still trailblazing, and these systems were not originally designed for us. We just had to make room for women at the table and in those systems, and that can cause some tension. And certainly when there is a gender dynamic, even if it's implicit, there are opportunities certainly for both sides to understand kind of what role they're playing in that dynamic and to overcome it. But women have done an amazing job of trailblazing in local government. There's still, obviously based on stats, more work to be done there, but definitely want to acknowledge that some of the things we feel about not belonging, not being qualified are baked in the system. And some of it is based on our own lived experience, but just want to flag that one too, and recognize the person that dropped it into the Q&A and really brought that conversation forward too. It's a big part of the discussion, and certainly a very large conversation. We can have an entire Leading Local just on imposter syndrome, which is an important topic too. I do want to flag a couple things. Please keep dropping questions in the Q&A. We're dropping them into the conversation as they fit in. And so if you've got questions, now's a great time to drop them in to make sure that we get to them. These women are definitely giving us great insights, and we want to keep doing that. And I want to make sure that this is a good time. So we'll see how many we need to flag. Here's a great question.
Can I just have listening to this conversation about imposter syndrome, and you ask yourself, well, did I ever feel like I didn't belong there? And it's realizing the imposter syndrome is what do you feel? But a lot of times that comes from what we think other people feel, that we don't belong there. And you can be an expert in your field or just beginning in your field and feel like, well, do I have the right to speak up there? And but a lot of times when you feel like you should know more than you do, you don't give yourself the opportunity to make a mistake. Okay. Those that feel like they belong there, they either never admit their mistakes, or the effective people make a mistake, admit it, and they move on. And
Yeah.
they don't stop with, oh, I was not perfect. And you could feel like you don't belong if you're not perfect in everything you do. Nobody is. And we all make decisions. Sometimes it's a mistake based on the information we have. So when you feel like, I have the ability to be here and to contribute, you worry less about what other people think. It's their issue there. You were elected, you were chosen, you were hired for your job, or you began your own private business and you have customers coming for whatever reason, and they have chosen and given you the permission to be there. Take that, learn from it, and you will then be able to engage others that may not respect you being there, but you've got to respect for yourself that you give yourself permission to be there. And then you'll worry less about the job that you are doing, and you will start doing the job.
I really love that. Okay, we're getting some great questions in the Q&A box. Keep them coming. And I want to flag a couple of them that sync up with what you just said, Supervisor, which is this idea of, coming in and being you, like just really, doing your job, being yourself. And there's a comment in here about this. Some people, and certainly I know I've experienced this before, this temptation to suppress that authentic self, to appear to be stronger or more whatever than you might, to fit in, right? To feel like you're supposed to be there, to fit into the institution, to fit into the place, and maybe putting aside who you might actually be, your authentic self, to appear the way you think people want you to be. And maybe I haven't heard from Rebecca. I don't know if this is something you want to answer, but have you got any tips for our listener audience for like how to put aside that fear to show up as your authentic self, how to really be who you are and bring yourself to the table?
I guess it goes a little bit back to, again, the discussion of imposter syndrome, but I think sometimes it can also be someone around you, or a peer, a colleague, maybe even a supervisor who also kind of recognizes those talents in you. A lot of times, as you said, we all were hired for typically or elected to the jobs that we have. And that's because someone else recognized that in you. And so I think the temptation to, be someone different than you are, we need to kind of, I guess the best way to kind of overcome that is realize that we were put in this role because of who we already were. And so it's not because of who we were pretending to be, because people see through that easily and quickly. And so if you are hired for a promotion or something else, then you're just kind of being someone else because you think that's who you're supposed to be. It's going to be found out anyway, and then it's going to be worse. Mm-hmm. So I would say just, again, go in there. Don't worry as much about what people think of you. There's that phrase of you wouldn't worry so much what people thought of you if you realize how little they do it. And so I think in our heads, we often think like, oh, they're all thinking of noticing what I did here and thinking of this, and they're really not, because they're thinking that from themselves too, like, oh, maybe other people are noticing this thing that I did. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the advice that I would give.
Excellent. Anyone else?
No, I think that I have to agree. People really don't scrutinize others as much as we feel that we do that for ourselves. And you're just looking ahead. I'm looking at some of the questions here. Feeling overwhelmed, not being able to say no is really, one of the things that you do have to learn, or you'll never have any balance. And, there are some times when you have to say yes to everything, and you have to be there, but realize that's not going to be forever. And you are the only one that decides when it stops. So make sure that you don't sit on pins and needles every minute waiting for the next thing to drop, because you're missing a lot of things in the
Mhm.
meantime that you could be experiencing with your family, with your friends, with, having the life. I happen to live in a county that nobody gets their mail delivered. Everyone has to go to the post office wherever it is there. And so, and we had for so many years one grocery store in the one incorporated town. So you had no anonymity. You saw everyone at the grocery store and everyone at the post office, and you knew that somebody was going to talk on to you about whatever was important to them on your free time. So you realize that that's one of the beauties, that you live in a small area where everyone knows you, and that's the biggest drawbacks, that you can't step back. But it's looking at, you don't have to be there every single minute. Today you may be, but then take those experiences back, because we're going to, like I said earlier, it's a long haul, and you want to enjoy that, and you want to be fulfilled in what comes along. And yeah, we all take too much on, but it then you find the small victories and little things that are important to people there. That's really why they're asking you to fight for them. So,
Yeah.
and celebrate those victories. It's important.
I really appreciate that. I want to lean into it a little bit more because there's another question in here that ties to that. And I think it goes a little bit with something that Michelle mentioned about do a little more than you're asked to do. Make sure that you set yourself apart really when you're looking at climbing that career ladder. And really, those are the things that have helped you along the way in your role. There's some people on the line that feel like they are feeling overwhelmed. Now they've done that, and now they've got too much on their plates. They're looking for ways to communicate within their supervisor structure. Okay, I need to cut back on my workload to help my mental health. I'm doing all the things, but now I need to set some boundaries, like Supervisor Dugan's saying. But now what do I do? So in the spirit of you want to give as much as you can, but you need to set boundaries. Can you help with some tips for balancing this? Like, actually, as a staff person, when you don't manage all of this yourself, you don't get to decide anymore. Your workload's too busy. What do we do?
Well, one thing is, I think, speak up. And sometimes that can be hard, but if you are really like doing the most kind of thing, you need to point it out to whoever's doing the assigning or evaluating or supervising, and point that out and say, I love doing more than I was asked, but it's at a point where I can only do so much.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give my all to the organization. And but I think if you kind of reassign this box to someone else, then I can be even more productive and effective in the Y and the Z that's left. So that's one approach. And I know some people have a challenge doing that, but you have to kind of build up yourself and say, I can convey this because the evidence is there. And sometimes I know people feel, well, everybody else will say, I'm too busy too. And so then there's no place to take it. But hopefully some of the facts will speak for themselves. And
if you have a good manager, that person will say, oh, okay. And then maybe they'll understand it, right? They'll appreciate
and recognize
honesty and have that open dialogue.
Yeah.
I
Part
really
of that goes like what I said at the beginning too, after she spoke, was about knowing your self-worth too.
Yeah.
And the guidelines, the boundaries around your life, because if your mental health is on the end, no matter what you're doing, believe me, if you drop dead tomorrow, they're gonna find somebody by next week to replace you, to fill in until they get somebody else, and then they're gonna pay them more because they're gonna be like, I'm doing all this for all this. And so the thing is, having the boldness, really, as we're saying, to be able to speak up. But you have to, there comes a point in our lives where we have to just say, you know what, this is it. We have to stop, and we need to reevaluate what we really want to do going forward. And some great bosses will be able to be able to hear you and see you. And there are some bosses that are not so great, and they won't hear. but you're going to really have to just, sometimes it's making those hard decisions. I tell you, the times I've been laid off in my life, the first time it was just like a blur, and I was in my mid-20s. I was in my MBA program. I was pregnant with my third child, and I was devastated. I'm like, what? I mean, I am managing multi-million-dollar contracts. I'm doing all these great things, and I was doing a lot for a little bit of pay. But when I got moved out of there, God opened my eyes to see that every door that was closed on purpose is a definite door opened up somewhere else. And then I was able to do greater things in other areas. So we can't be afraid. We can't be afraid that some things may actually cause us to have to do something different. And when it's the best place for us to be, that's going to happen. And if it's where we are, then the door is going to open for that. We have to believe that.
I love
That's a
it.
good
All right, we've got some great questions in here. I want to make sure before we wrap up, we get to a couple of them. And some of them are themed around conflict and just the nature of it, particularly the nature of it in government and how people deal with conflict in these public spaces. Two different kind of facets of this. How do you address conflict and discord when things are not good? How do you do it? Do you call it out? Do you not? How do you grow from things that are really difficult? Particularly, it can be conversations with colleagues. It could be conversations with superiors in the structural sense. Any tips for how you deal with conflict and resolve that as a woman, as a leader in local government in a public-facing environment? How do you do that with respect, but how do you do it effectively so you're still your whole person, you're being authentic to yourself?
I can go with this, just because when I came into office, it was high level of conflict and things, but mainly with the public, because 85% of our county was out of work overnight when we shut down because we were a resort industry, and trying to deal with that. And that was even before I got on the board. But we had very, very vocal people giving their opinions about the actions that were set by the state that we didn't have anything necessarily to do, but are we going to do it, and how could we do that? And just very passionate. So the first thing you do is that you listen with an open mind to their position and really see is what can you do to address this, and is there anything that can be done? And sometimes there's not anything there, but that we validate that they have an opinion of where it is. And sometimes that happens also with your colleagues on the board. It's a very interesting dynamic when you have 5 people that really are doing the same job, but are allowed to collaborate except in front of the public. And so you may be very surprised at somebody's particular position, but you listen and you accept their position, and then you have to make decisions and move on. But if you treat everyone with respect to listen to it, they may not like your decision, but they know that you've been heard.
Wonderful.
And it's a challenge. It really is, and it continues to be.
What about from the staff position, Rebecca? Anything from you or Michelle? How do you deal with conflict?
One thing I would say, especially like internally, with colleagues or just within the organization, a lot of times it stems from assumptions and misinformation, where someone might say, oh, I heard this. And then all of a sudden everybody's saying that, whatever it is, but that's not even true. And so people come into my office and the joke is that I'll just say, well, what does the law say? What does the policy say? Because I always am going to go back to what are the actual facts of the issue. Let's remove the emotion out, because right now, we're all kind of in it emotionally, but what is the actual issue that we're talking about? And so again, as Supervisor Dugan said, for sure listening, because again, people want to be heard and all sides need to be heard sometimes before that conflict can be resolved. So if you're only looking at it one-sided, making a decision in a vacuum and not realizing how it's impacting other people, that's an issue as well. So, and sometimes that's where it lies too, because there was maybe a decision made without considering who it would impact and how it would impact those people. So again, just kind of hearing everybody's side, trying to come to a decision together when you have time. Obviously, sometimes there's emergency scenarios where someone has to make a decision immediately because it's an emergency and no one has time to have a focus group or, figure out everyone's beliefs in that moment. But again, just kind of listening to everyone and keeping your head above any gossip and misinformation also, and just kind of, shutting those things down when you hear them as well.
Yeah. And I know that it's important to not burn bridges in theory, and sometimes it's hard not to do that. There's a couple questions in here about that, and we'll transition into, when is the time to just not to take the fight, right? You've gone through the conflict, you've explored, you've tried to communicate in the right ways, you've tried to do all the right things. At what stage do you step back and say, this is time for me to let this fight go? Any of you have any tips for understanding that one? Like, when's the time to just call it and transition, walk away, right? Set the boundary and walk away from a discussion, or maybe even a position or an organization.
It's really a challenge, and I'm coming from a different perspective as far as like when I'm on the dais. It's very difficult when conflict is not over the issue, because in a perfect world, you're dealing with only the issue. But some things are debated in already made up minds because of personalities, or maybe it is what somebody heard, rumors or whatever, and people have their own take on you as a person. So anything that you stand for, anything that you bring forward is going to be a fight. It's going to be an issue. And so, but part of the thing really, and even setting those boundaries, is that no, I'm not going to be disrespected. And we are going to try to keep it to the level of the issue, but you can't just, people did not elect us to sit back and not have moral courage for the things that we actually need to vote on. And it's not about your feelings being hurt or somebody doesn't like this or somebody doesn't like that, but this is the reality for our community. And I think it's important that we are expressing the needs of the community and not only just reflecting the voices of the people, but being able to take account in all the real information that goes into making those decisions. And so some things are just going to be contentious. You're going to have to just make hard decisions. I remember the first hard decision I made was to allow Sutter to be built, an extension. Now people look at it and say, oh, what a wonderful thing, but you don't know what all we went through to be able to have that. And it was a 3-2 vote to do that. But sometimes, as far as when it gets to personalities, you can't let yourself get wrapped up in that, or else it's just extra unnecessary mental stress and anguish. And it's hard to let go of that. But I think once you've gotten your point across, as far as, at least representing your community, the most you can do. And sometimes you have to step back, and I can see it's going to fail, but I've already said, this is what it's going to be. This is not a financially good decision, or whatever the reason is, whatever the conflict, the real conflict is. And then getting to that. But it takes really good leadership to be able to highlight what the real issue is. And some are going to still ignore that. But we have to be able to move on so that when that item is done, we can move on to another item. And the same thing in the workforce. We have to be able to deal with an issue. And then once we get past that, we have to be able to set it aside and deal with something else with fresh eyes.
Yeah, have that moral courage, have the independence and ability to stand on that in a respectful manner, and then move on to the other things. I appreciate that. We have time for one more question before we have to wrap this amazing panel up. I want to lean us into the future. I want to lean us into the conversation about being women in local government. And there's a couple questions about how you lead as women and how you encourage other women to move into these spaces and climb the ladder. How you do that intentionally, if you're mentors, right? There's also conversations about some people feeling like women haven't supported them in the past. We can't answer all of those questions, but specifically, can you give us your closing thoughts on just being a woman in local government and how you would like to lean into the future, whether it's through mentorship or recommendations for how to continue to be positive in this space, or what you would like to kind of close us out with, your parting thoughts related to your experience and your recommendations, your tips for those that are watching and listening today. And we'll start with, who would like to start?
I thought we were going alphabetical order. Maybe we can go reverse. Okay, the class.
Go reverse? You want to go first?
So I was Lipscomb growing up, so I was always in the middle, either way it went. But okay, I think it's very important that we're that we're mentoring others, that we're helping others come alongside us, not just behind us, but alongside us, and creating seats at the table for others to be able to sit alongside us. And I remember when I was running for my first re-election campaign in 2016, there was another Black young lady who was running as well. And she actually called me. She said, people are concerned because, it wasn't very popular to run as a minority. And they said, that she would be going against me. I said, no, it's 2 seats and we can support one another. I literally had her at all my events and had her speak at every event. And I said, there are 2 seats and you can support both of us, because she's a wonderful person in the community, doing a lot for our young people, as was I with mentoring. And we supported one another throughout that entire campaign. And of course, we both won. It was a historical win, but I refuse to just say I'm the only one who's made it somewhere. I am trying to help build into others along the way. Even now, I know I'm terming out and I'm looking to see how can I pour into others to help them come alongside me so that they'll be ready to go forward. I don't know why we feel like we have to carry the baton until we die and then let somebody else figure it out behind us. Let's just help one another. There's something that I can always learn from others and I can always give it to someone else.
I love that. Thank you. Rebecca, 30 seconds. What do you got?
All right. It was a little discouraging to read in the Q&A about the person who had been discouraged by other women that were higher up, because that just breaks my heart. Like Michelle, I had an awesome female boss who helped me become the writer I am. And I just, learning from her greatly helped me, in my current job as well. And so I would just say, continue to surround yourself by strong women that you look up to, and even just, again, mentorship, friendship, keep those connections far beyond, when that job ends. I know there are plenty of women, and I shouldn't be speaking for all of us, but I think most of us here would love to talk with each one of you as well, answer questions that you might have, and just be there for each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. Supervisor Dugan.
Thank you. This question struck me because I did experience somebody that I worked with for years, that as we talk about this person going, they had the biggest opportunity to mentor us and they didn't. And I said, I don't want to do that. If I want to share, anybody that wants to hear or listen, feel free, because that's how you stop hoarding the information and you leave a legacy. And when you come in, and it's another part of feeling that you take on too much and overwhelm. That's feeling you feel like you're the only one that can do this. And so when you look at a situation is, do you want me to do this? Or do you want me to teach others to do this? That's the legacy. And then that way you are able to step back and balance your life and be the mentor that you wanted to have, because somebody out there wants it.
Thank you. Michelle, last
I'll
comment,
say
please.
ditto to that. And I think it's important to not feel like you can't ask someone outside of your, let's say, your employment, outside of your organization. Ask questions, ask for advice. There are a lot of role models out there, and ask men. Women don't have to mentor just women. We need to broaden our net and bring people in and mentor them and seek others that we would like to be mentored by. And mentoring, it could be a little bit or a lot. Some people think it's a lot. I don't have time to mentor, okay? Because I'm trying to do this and this and this and this and this. So it's a conversation. It's, people said, oh, I don't have time for lunch. Okay, so maybe they don't have time for lunch, but whatever. And I don't think it's a problem. Somebody said recently they recommended against asking those that you wanted to mentor for time. Just send them an email. Don't try to steal their time, because they're busy people and they don't have time. And I don't agree. If they don't have time, then they will they'll let you know. So reach out and communicate.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much. And along those lines, I want to wrap us up by just saying that I think we heard that all of our panelists potentially could be very interested in supporting your work moving forward. Certainly at ILG, we are as well. We want to thank you for your time. We want to thank you for your experience. And we thank those of you who were able to join us. First things first, while we're wrapping up, make sure if you're not already on our social handles or on our newsletter, please join those because that is the best way to get information about ILG and certainly about all the things that we are doing. And if you want to connect with the panelists or connect with a larger network of women in local government, the next slide speaks to a little bit more about how you can reach out to the panelists. If you want to get to any of these panelists, go to the next slide. You've got my contact information there. You can certainly reach out to us and we will connect you with any of the panelists that you'd like to speak with. If we did not get your question answered, we will do our best to make sure that we get a couple answers that we straggled, we didn't quite get to. We'll make sure we get those written up for you. Some really great ones still in the chat. We just got bombarded at the end and we tried to make sure everyone got covered. We tried to get a bit of it. If we didn't cover everything, shoot me an email and we'll make sure to get some insights from the panelists to wrap up those thoughts. I just want to thank everyone for their time today. I want to thank the panelists for the conversation, just the candor, for the back and forth, and for the different perspectives that you bring. You all have different experiences, different journeys, and you've shared some of that with us. And it's so valuable to see how you approach things and certainly what others can look up to as they're navigating their careers and their role in public service and just thinking about how they can continue to give back and do it successfully. Next slide speaks to just our recording for this, which will be available very soon. You should be able to find it on our website next week if you weren't able to join live. And then we just want to thank you again for the time. Thank you for all of the contributions you've made. And thank you for supporting and being engaged with the Institute for Local Government. Next slide. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Nice
Thank
moderating.
you.